Hi, welcome to Straight Talk About God video. Well, this is number 11 in the whole series of the Lost Tribes, and it's X-rated Bible again. Yeah, we have murder and maiming and sex and kingdoms topple and so forth. And the question is, see, there's a kingship dilemma that has to be resolved here. And the question is, how can we have a king if all the boys are dead? All the princes are dead. How does that work? You know, gosh. Well, we've been at this for quite a while now, but we're probably not even halfway through yet. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. But just to get started, we want to recap a little bit, okay? The Lost Tribes, that's not the Jews. No, that's the northern kingdom of the house of Israel, the 10 tribes. They were conquered by Assyria and deported up underneath the Black Sea and the Caucasus Mountains. And from there, they migrated. Some of them went a little bit north and then went west. And some of them were underneath the Black Sea and they went west. And a few of them went east, some small groups. But the larger group went west, okay? And they weren't known by the names that we know them in the Bible. And so they must be lost. Can't be around here. I'm going to have to stop for just a second here and close this door. Reality TV. Okay, and they got conquered but the names that we know them by in the Bible, they all got changed depending on who they were living around. You know, I mean, they were called the Saka or the Iskuza or the Gamira or the Jimmerai or the Kamerioi or the Khumri, or a lot of different names, Sake, you know. And those names we can trace in a lot of history books. But we don't find the house of Israel. We don't find the names that we know from the Bible. And so when they traveled east, or traveled from the east west into the northwest Europe and the British Isles, and and those through successive waves over 1,500 years, they moved from the Black Sea and above the Black Sea and below the Black Sea over to the west and into the British Isles in successive different waves. Okay, there were some called Celts, some were the Angles, the Saxons, and that migration into the British Isles, for all intents and purposes, stopped when William the Conqueror came down and with the Normans and took over in 1066. So from like 500 BC to 1066 AD, different bunches of people, of Israelites, migrated into Northwest Europe and the British Isles. Okay? And then last time, we did a whole bunch of prophecies and found a lot of them were true. Most all of the prophecies to the house of Israel in the prophets have been fulfilled already. Okay, they were told by not they, but David was told by Abraham, by Nathan the prophet, that they'd go to a place that they'd call their own. And this is after almost 40 years of peace in the Middle East, and David is ruling and no problems with the enemies or anything like that, you know. And not only that, but they would move no more. Well, they were moving no more already, weren't they? See? But the last part The last part was the thing that is not arguable, because he said that implying that in that place where they move, their enemies would be far away from them. Israel's enemies were never far away from them, down in the Holy Land. But up in Britain, they weren't afraid of the Arabs in the Middle East, were they? No. Okay. Also, though, we found that the prophecy to David included a very important prophecy, two things: that his bloodline would last forever. He would be a dynasty, a house, whatever you call that. His seed would last forever. And that anywhere you'd find huge groups of Israelites, whole nations kind of Israelites, there would be a line of David, a son, a descendant of David, be found to ruling over them. And that goes because of two things: not only just Nathan, but Judah. Remember, Judah got the birthright, part of the birthright, from Jacob when he was ready to die. And Jacob said, you can rule a family, be the king, and you be the depository of God's law. Those two things, that was all he got. Joseph got everything else. And so from then on, Judah can rule the family. Okay? The whole family, not just the Judahites, not just his family, but the whole Israelite family of 12 tribes. And that's what David did. David was on the line of Judah, and he ruled the 12 tribes. And that was God's promise to Judah and to David. Okay? What else do we have to recap here? It says, but because, and so because of that, the people can't rule themselves, right? Now, 130 years go by after Samaria falls in 721, okay, the official fall of the house of Israel, the end of the kingdom period. Okay, 130 years later is when Nebuchadnezzar comes against Jerusalem and the house of Judah, which is still left over in there. And the Babylonian captivity of 70 years starts, and Nebuchadnezzar kills all of the king's sons. What do we do now? Well, of course he kills all the king's sons, because one son can't escape and then say later on, I'm the son of the king, and I'll gather you people together and we'll fight against Babylon, and we'll, no rebellion. You don't have a king, you can't rebel, right? Okay. So we want to go, we're going to do a lot of reading out of the Bible today, okay? And you're going to have to look at my forehead a lot, but I'll try to be succinct as I can. Well, first off, we're going to go to 2 Kings, and we have to look at places in chapters 24 and 25, okay? 24 and 25. First of all, let's take a look at 24, 10 through 17. Nebuchadnezzar comes against Babylon, against Jerusalem. He gets the king, Jehoiakim, K-I-M, Jehoiakim, and he takes him and nobles and all the craftsmen, people who are really producers, outside of the agriculture thing, the producers, the people who can make it on their own and don't have to depend on the government, takes them all Babylon, okay? That's starting in, some say 608, maybe 603 BC. And his son, Jehoiachin, C-H-I-N, begins to reign, and he reigns under the rule of Nebuchadnezzar, okay? So Jehoiachin is doing, and then verse 10, at that time the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem, and the king, and the city was besieged. And Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came against the city, and his servants did besiege it. And See, 2 times, you got to repeat, you got to pay attention. Okay? And Jehoiachin, the king of Judah, went out to the king of Babylon, and he and his mother and his servants and his princes and his officers, and the king of Babylon took him in the 8th year of his reign. 8th year of his reign. And he carried out thence all the treasures of the house of the Lord, the treasures of the king's house, cut in pieces the vessels of gold which Solomon had, king of Israel, had made in the temple of the Lord, as the Lord had said. And he carried it all away from Jerusalem, all the princes, all the mighty men of valor, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. None remained save the poorest sort of the people of the land. Fine dressers and so forth. Okay? Let's see, that was 10 to 17. And he carried away Jehoiachin to Babylon, and the king's mother, and the king's wives, and the officers, and the mighty men of the land, and those carried he a captivity from Jerusalem to Babylon, and all the men, verse 16, all the men of might, even 7,000, and craftsmen and smiths, 1,000, and all that were strong and apt for war, even the king of Babylon, who even them the king of Babylon brought captive to Babylon. And the king of Babylon made Mattaniah, his father's brother, Jehoiachin's father's brother, okay, king in his stead, and he changed his name to Zedekiah, which is where we were going. Okay, so Jerusalem gets offed and completely conquered, and hardly anybody's left, any big important people, and he makes Zedekiah the king. Now, let's go to chapter 18 through 20, okay? Zedekiah was 21 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem, and his mother's name was Hamutal, the daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and all that Jehoiakim had done. He was a bad guy too. Okay. For through the anger of the Lord, it came to pass, Jerusalem and Judah, until he had cast them out from his presence, that Zedekiah rebelled against Babylon. Okay, so now we got Zedekiah, we got him ruling, Babylon is conquering, and we go over to 25, 1 through 7. Came to pass in the 9th year of the reign, the 10th month of the 10th day, 10 is the number of human responsibility. And if you don't keep your word, you're not being very responsible, right? In the 10th month of the day, that Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came, he and all his host, against Jerusalem, and pitched against it, and built forts against it round about, and besieged the city in the 11th year of King Zedekiah. The people fell. There was no bread in the city. The men of war fled by the way of the gate, the walls. The Chaldeans were against the city round about, and the king went the way toward the plain. Now, let me stop and tell you that this is Chronicles, right? I mean, this is Kings. And Kings is the history of all Israel from the Judah perspective, right? Chronicles is from the other side, from the house of Israel. They wrote a history, and a lot of things are the same in there, but this is from Judah, okay? They pursued the king, and they took him in the plain of Jericho. All his army was scattered from him. They took the king, brought him to Babylon, to Nebuchadnezzar at Riblah, brought him to the king of Babylon, to Riblah. And they slew the sons of the king, Zedekiah, before his eyes, and put out the eyes of Zedekiah, and bound him in fetters of brass, and carried him to Babylon. The last thing he was going to see was his sons killed. The heirs to the throne. All the heirs to the throne are gone. Nobody can ever take the throne of Israel again. Nebuchadnezzar was cutting the line, right? But also I want to bring your attention to the fetters of brass. We're going to see in Jeremiah, it's just the chains. Well, why not say, and he bound him in fetters and brought him out. He said fetters of brass. Brass is always the symbol for judgment. Judgment. And it says in one place they brought him to Riblah for judgment. And he was fettered with brass, judgment, and taken away to Jerusalem. Okay? But then we want to jump over, we want to continue on. In the 5th month, the 5th day of the month, which is the 19th year of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, a servant of the king of Babylon, unto Jerusalem. And he offed everything else. He burnt houses and burnt the temple and broke everything down, took more captives away and all that. But the captain of the guard left the poor of the land to be vine dressers and husbandmen. That's all. Nobody that can rebel, right? And it says he took all the snufters and the gold things out of the temple and everything. He took the 2 pillars, 1 sea. Remember that big sea of the big, I don't know, it was like 12 feet in diameter or something like that, a big water basin, that they washed in, out in the outer court with those 2 big pillars that Solomon put up. And it was all brass. It was all brass. You walk into the main door of the tabernacle. There's only one door in the front. That's all you need. There's only one door. Okay, and you walk into the outer area there, and there's these 2 big brass judgment pillars. You're going to be judged before you see God. Okay? But let's see. We wanted to go 8 to 12. 8 to 12, he burnt the house and the rest of the people, the fugitives, they took them away. Nebuchadnezzar, vine dressers. That's it. But now, you remember God repeats himself. And when he does, you pay attention because he means what he says. It isn't just some little thing that's one time in the Bible and that's it. We'll go to Jeremiah 39. And that's 4 through 8. Okay, but I have to start for a little background at 1. Okay, in the 9th year, we just did this. In the 9th year of Zedekiah, the king of Judah, came Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, and all his army against Jerusalem, and they besieged it. In the 11th year. Okay, well, we know the context now, okay? So let's go over to verse 4. And it came to pass that when Zedekiah, the king of Judah, saw them and all the men of war, that they fled and went forth out of the city by the night, by the way of the king's garden, by the gate betwixt the 2 walls, and he went out by the way, of the plain. But the Chaldeans' army pursued after them and overtook Zedekiah in the plains of Jericho. And when they had taken him, they brought him to Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, in Riblah, in the land of Hamath, where he gave judgment upon him. Then the king of Babylon slew the king of the sons of Zedekiah in Riblah before his eyes, and also the king of Babylon slew all the nobles of Judah, any ones that were left that he hadn't already carried away. Moreover, he put out Zedekiah's eyes and bound him with chains. That's all it says, bound him with chains. Brass chains, okay, to carry him to Babylon. And the Chaldeans burned the king's house and the houses of the people with fire and break down the walls of Jerusalem. And there's some more stuff about Nebuzaradan there, but we're going to talk about that later on. Right now, we want to go to 2 Chronicles 36. 2 Chronicles 36. where is that? 36, 9 through 23. And Jehoiachin, now, over in 2 Kings, which is the chronicle by the Jews, so they should know, it says that Jehoiachin was 18 when he began to rule. 18. Well, that's well into manhood, seeing that 13 is the passage, right? You know. But here, it says that Jehoiachin was 8 years old. I very well doubt that, you know. 8 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 3 months and 10 days in Jerusalem, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. And that's one of the things that doesn't fit for an 8-year-old. An 8-year-old, you know, he's still hanging on to his mama's breast, his mama's, not breast, his apron strings, right? He's only 8 years old. He did that was what did he do? You know, but he was 18, that was okay, see? Evil in the sight of the Lord. And when the year was expired, King Nebuchadnezzar sent and brought him to Babylon with the goodly vessels of the house of the Lord, and made Zedekiah, his brother, king of, you know, that isn't quite right either. See, this is the house of Israel. The house of Israel making a chronicle, a history, see? And it's right down at the very end, right there at the very end, you see 36 is the very last chapter in Chronicles. Well, then how do these guys who've been gone, when Zedekiah's alive, they've been gone for 130 years. How do they still write this chapter about the fall of Jerusalem and Zedekiah and so forth? They probably don't, because mostly it's said that Ezra wrote this last chapter or two, see, because they were gone, right? Okay, but Zedekiah, his brother, the king of Zedekiah, was 21 years old when he began to reign, and reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. And he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, his God, and humbled not himself before Jeremiah the prophet, speaking out of the mouth of the Lord. This isn't Jeremiah talking here. Okay? Jeremiah is his grandfather. We'll get into that in real detail much later on. Number 19 or 20. Okay. And he did that which was evil, but didn't humble himself before Jeremiah. He also rebelled against Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? Nebuchadnezzar, who had made him swear by God that, but he stiffened his neck and hardened his heart from turning unto the Lord God of Israel. Screwed up. He rebelled, didn't keep his word, and I think that's half the reason why God let Nebuchadnezzar conquer him, because he didn't keep his word. He swore by God, and then you don't do that. Not with God, you know. There were some other reasons why God allowed Nebuchadnezzar, but that would have been a good reason right there. Okay, 1 to 9 view from Judah, 23. We didn't go finish with that, right? 23. Moreover, the chief priests, they transgressed abominations of the heathen. They allowed messengers rising up, mocked the messengers. He brought upon them the king of the Chaldeans and slew their young men with the sword. All the vessels he took out of the thing from Babylon. Let's see, 23, the word of the Lord. Now, in the first year of Cyrus, the king of Persia, verse 22, that the word of the Lord spoken by the mouth of Jeremiah might be accomplished. What word was that? I think that was one of the prophecies that we covered last time, and that was that they were to be captive taken to Babylon, and they would stay there for 70 years. But that's all, just 70 years. The word of Jeremiah might be accomplished. The Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, the king of Persia. This is after he conquered Babylon, okay? He's the first one that got that conquered Babylon. Cyrus, that he made a proclamation throughout all his kingdom and put it in writing, saying, Thus saith Cyrus, the king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth hath the Lord God of heaven given to me. And he hath charged me to build him an house in Jerusalem. How'd he know that? Which is in Judah. Who is there among you of all his people? The Lord his God be with him, and let him go back. Any of you Jews want to go back? Out of you 650,000 that were carried away captivity. Any of you guys want to go back? Go ahead. And he might even help them out a little bit. But, I mean, that's pretty heavy talk from a heathen king, God. Wait a minute. How did he, because Isaiah wrote his prophecy, I think we went through this one time already. Isaiah wrote his prophecy during the time of the house of Israel's rule, when they were a separate kingdom after they ruled. Isaiah was a prophet to them. Elijah was in there, and Isaiah was in there, and Isaiah says, 47, 8, somewhere in there, that this is 200 years before Cyrus is born. He says there's going to be a king rise up, and his name will be Cyrus, and he'll let my people go. Whoa! Well, don't you know that all of the sacred books made it back to Babylon with all those Israelites and the nobles and so forth, and Daniel with his cousins, Meshach, Abednego, and them? They were princes. They were princes. That's one of the reasons why Daniel could make it up to being the president of the whole Babylonian Empire. You know, under Xerxes and those guys, you know, he was the head of the troika of presidents that ruled all of Babylon. Eh? Well, he had those prophecies, and it says there that he read the prophecies of Jeremiah, and he said, wait a minute, oh, my people can go. Cyrus was sure to find that out. Well, what do you think? What do you think he thought when he read Isaiah and it said there was his name written 200 years later, earlier rather, before he was even born? He said, uh-oh, I see what's going on here. These people, I don't care whether their God is my God or whatever, but these people, their God was behind me conquering. Oh, okay. You guys want to go home? Go ahead. No big deal. Go on. Go home. Isn't that neat? Well, okay. You're in Judah and what? Nebuchadnezzar cut the line, didn't he? Now what happens? We've got the promise to Judah, and we've got 4-5 million Israelites up there north, above the Black Sea and below the Black Sea, and ready to go west over into the British Isles. We got hordes, millions of Israelites, and no son of David to rule over them. God's got a problem here. We got a dilemma. Who's going to rule? You know? Not the sons of Zara, because David's line, Zara's out of Judah, right? That's true. Zara's out of Judah, and Jacob said, Judah, you rule the family. All the Israelites, not just your own tribe. But then comes David's promise. Well, what's God going to do about that? First of all, I want to do an experiment, a little experiment, okay? No, you can turn there, but don't read along with me, okay? This is a little experiment. And I'm going to do some reading, a little bit of reading, and you see if you can find a point somewhere in the reading. I'll read about 10 or 12 verses. You find a point somewhere in there where there's a definite break. A definite break, okay? A very big kind of a break. Not just a break between paragraphs of story, okay? Big break, okay? Here it is. And they took Joseph's coat. That's, remember when he went out to the boys to bring them cheese and stuff, and they were going to kill him, you know, and they threw him in a pit. And they took Joseph's coat, and what did they do with him? They sold it to some Midianites, Ishmaelites that were going by in a camel train. Sold him for a slave rather than kill him. Okay? And they took Joseph's coat and killed the kid of the goats and dipped it in blood. And they sent the coat of many colors, and they brought it to their father and said, "Thus we have found. Know now whether this is thy son's coat or no." And he knew it, and he said, "It is my son's coat, and an evil beast hath devoured him. Joseph is without doubt rent in pieces." And Jacob rent his clothes, put sackcloth on his loins, and mourned for his son many days. And all of his sons and all of his daughters rose up to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. And he said, "For I will go down unto the grave unto my son mourning." Thus his father wept for him. And the Midianites sold Joseph into Egypt unto Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh's, and the captain of the guard. Okay? And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, the officer of Pharaoh, and captain of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him at the hands of the Ishmaelites, which had brought him down thither. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he was prosperous. He was a prosperous man, and he was in the house of his master the Egyptian, and his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper in his hand, and Joseph was made blah, 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 blah. Where was the break? There wasn't any, was there? You know, it's just one continuous story. They sold him to the Midianites, and they sold him to Potiphar, and then they sold him to Potiphar again, and he became the overseer of his whole house and everything. But the thing was that the first part that I read, the first few verses, first 6 or 7 verses, was the end of chapter 37 of Genesis, and the next few verses that I read were the first few verses of chapter 39. It sounded like one continuous story, and there was a whole chapter stuck in the middle that I didn't even read. Well, what kind of organization is that? God puts this parentheses, Dr. Scott used to call it God's parentheses, right in the middle of this story of Joseph. And it doesn't have anything to do with Joseph, right? You'll see. We're going to read that whole chapter, okay? Okay, 37, 39, okay, chapter 38. Seems like it's out of context, but I don't think it is, okay? And it came to pass at that time that Judah, well, at that time, what at that time is? They're in the Holy Land already. Judah evidently isn't married, doesn't have any kids, and they're living there. They've already been, like I said, in the Holy Land. It's not out in the wilderness somewhere. And Judah went down from his brethren and turned in to a certain Adullamite whose name was Hira. He had a buddy up there named Hira. Okay. And Judah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite. Uh-oh, red flag, red flag. Canaanite woman, whose name was Shua. And he took her and went in unto her, married her. Went in unto her, but he married her too. And she conceived and bare a son. And he called his name E-R. And she conceived again and bare a son, and she called his name Onan. I thought it was kind of interesting because she conceived and he, Judah, called his name But Onan was named by Shua, the woman, and she called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son and called his name Shelah, S-H-E-L-A-H. And he was, Judah, was at Chizib, when she bare him. And Judah took a wife for his son, his firstborn, whose name was Tamar. Now, I don't think you're going to find Tamar's lineage, but she was an Israelite. She had to be. As you'll see what happened to all the Canaanite kids. Okay, you don't marry a Canaanite. Okay, these two kids, that's why this chapter is so important. These two kids are not qualified to rule the family because they're half Canaanite. And Judah's firstborn, was wicked in the sight of the Lord, and the Lord slew him. Now, I don't take that to mean that God said one day, you're a bad guy, and he zapped him with a thunderbolt or a lightning bolt or something. You know, I mean, he might have fallen off a high cliff and died. Whatever it was, God allowed him to die, okay? Whoa, he was the firstborn, because he was a Canaanite. And God allowed him to be evil, so he got killed somehow. And what happened then? The usual practice in the old times. The usual practice happened. And Onan, secondborn, and Judah said to Onan, go into thy brother's wife and marry her and raise up seed to thy brother. It's an inheritance thing, see? And if your brother dies, you go and be with his wife so she has a son to carry on the inheritance of your brother. They did that all the time, okay? But, and Onan knew that the seed should not be his. And it came to pass that when he went into his brother's wife, that he spilled the seed, on the ground, lest that he should give seed to his brother. God didn't like that. See? And the thing which he did displeased the Lord. Now, displeased said was evil in the sight of the Lord. Wherefore, he slew him also. So now we got is gone, Onan is gone, and nothing but Shelah is left, the little kid. Okay? And then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house until Shelah my son be grown. For he said, lest peradventure he also, as his brothers did, die as his brothers did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. Okay? I think we just go right on from there, right? Tamar, and in the process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. The daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. No, I don't think that's right. Shua was his wife, right? He took a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. Okay, so that's probably or it doesn't say who her father was, does it? No, it doesn't. But anyway, she died. His wife died. And Shua was comforted. Okay. I guess to be comforted. He went up unto his sheep shearers in Timnath. He and his friend Hira the Adullamite. Okay? So he goes up to visit Adullamite. Take his mind off of his wife dying. And it was told Tamar, saying, Behold, thy father-in-law goeth up to Timnath to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place. That's what the prostitute did. Okay? Which is, by the way, to Timnath. For she saw that Shelah was grown. Well, how do we define grown? Judah said, no, Shia, he's just a boy yet. So he hadn't had his bar mitzvah or whatever they did when he became a man, after puberty. How many years after that? Was he 16, 17, 19? Maybe a little older. It was quite a number of years. She's over in her father's house, cold in her heels, in black garments for 7 or 8 years, and nothing's going on. And now all of a sudden, Judah's going up to Timnath, shear his sheep. She said, okay, I'll see what we're going to do here. And she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given to him for a wife. And when Judah saw her sitting by the way, all wrapped up with a veil across her face, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her. See, he doesn't care about the rules of the family. Don't marry a Canaanite woman. He doesn't care about that. This guy fools around, doesn't he? Huh? He's a swinger. And he turned to her and he said to her, Go to, I pray thee, let me come in unto thee. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What wilt thou give me that thou mayest come into me? And he said, I will send thee a kid from the flock. And she said, Well, wilt thou give me a pledge until you send it? You got a credit card here? And he said, Well, what pledge should I give thee? She said, Thy signet, thy bracelets, and thy staff, which is in thy hand. Okay? And he gave it to her, came in unto her, and she conceived by him. And she arose. He went up to Timnath. She arose and went away and laid by her veil from her, and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent a kid by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the hand of the woman. But he found her not. Well, then he asked the man of the place, saying, Where is that harlot that was here? Openly by the wayside. And they said, There's no harlot here. We don't know of any harlot. And he returned to Judah, and he said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. Well, Judah said, Well, let her take it to herself, lest we be shamed. Behold, I sent the kid, and thou hast not found her. Okay. Any problem, it's her fault. And it came to pass, about 3 months after, she's starting to get big, that it was told to Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, And also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, bring her forth and let her be burnt. Wow, let her be burnt. Boy, is he in for a surprise, isn't he? And when she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, by the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, discern, I pray thee, whose are these? The signet, the bracelets, and the staff. Uh-oh. And Judah acknowledged them, did the right thing for a change, and said, she hath been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Shelah, my son. And he knew her no more again. Took her on as a wife, but no lovemaking. That was it. And now we come to the main part, the main important point of this whole out of context chapter. First of all, we know that Judah has kids. Judah's the ruler of the family. He's got kids. There's no king at that time, so he was ruling. You know, he was the head guy. But we know that he didn't have any kids. He didn't have a wife. Now we know he has a kid. Now we know he's got kids, and he's pregnant. Tamar is now pregnant, and she's going to have a kid. And because she's of the right lineage, they will be in line for the rulership. The Canaanite, they're not going to be in line for the rulership. So Tamar's pregnant, she's going to have the kids. And it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And that was no surprise. Okay, that was no surprise. Surely by the 8th and 9th month, they knew twins were in there. You know, they had midwives, they had doctor types that knew stuff like that. Okay? And it's confirmed by what happens at the actual birth of the twins. The midwife knew there were twins. Keep that in mind. And it came to pass when she travailed that one of them put out his hand. That's all. And the midwife took and bound his hand, bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. Well, if you know there's twins in there, the very first one out gets signified somehow with a red cord. He's the firstborn. Extremely important that the firstborn be known. You know, there can't be any doubt in anybody's mind who the firstborn is, because it's going to cause a lot of problems later on. Okay? This came out first. What happened then? And it came to pass, as he drew back his hand, oh, boom. Behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Okay? Therefore his name was called Pharez. Pharez. And Pharez means breach. Okay? And afterward, see, and don't you think there were some arguments? I came out first. No, you didn't. Only your hand came out. I was first whole born. I've deserved. See? It didn't make any difference. You know, I'm sure there were arguments, but as we'll see in a whole lot of detail, Zara was the one that finally ruled, not Pharez, Zara. And afterward came out the brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Zara. Zara, which means dawn. That's the end of the chapter. And then we go back into, Joseph was brought down to Egypt into Potiphar's house, and he became good guy, and then he came over the house, and he was the overseer and all. What does that chapter do? You know, it gives us a very solid background for the kingship. Also, I want you to notice that it wasn't one kid. It was twins. Twins. God made space for twins. Well, why twins? Well, now we got two rulers, kind of. Zara's going to rule, but Pharez is the first generation out of there. God must have had some purpose, some reason to allow that. And we're going to get into this in a lot of detail, and we've already talked about what happened to Zara in Egypt. Okay? Joseph dies. He's not out of Judah. When Joseph dies, a son of Zara, a son of Judah, is going to rule. And the firstborn is Zara, so Zara, I don't think by the time Joseph dies that Zara probably is even alive. But his firstborn, his bloodline, is going to rule Egypt for almost 200 years. Okay? Joseph only ruled for 80 years, and the Israelites ruled for at least 250, maybe 300 years. Zara ruled for longer than this country's been in existence. Okay? But what happens to all the princes that aren't the firstborn of the generations that succeed Zara? They don't get to rule. Well, they made their way across the Mediterranean into Troy and Athens and Miletus and all of those city-states across the Mediterranean and made their own settlements, okay? And so the sons of Zara were ruling those migrations. And the kings of Zara, of the Zara line, were all across the northern Mediterranean. Zara ruled every place across there. Okay? And who was left? The sons of Pharez. Pharez was left in Egypt, and I mentioned before the Diodorus talks about two exoduses, one by land, one by sea. The one by land was with Moses. The one by sea was like 100 or so years before the Exodus with Moses. The Pharaoh is up there in Upper Egypt, you know, up on the Giza Plateau, sitting out on the deck by the pool, and he says, well, I think we should rule down there in Lower Egypt. You know, who is this guy Joseph? We don't even know what he was 300 years ago. You know, let's go down there and take back there's a lot of Israelites down there. They're going to go take over everything. They go down, conquer, take over. All the Zarahites and anybody else that can get on a ship, they split. And nobody's left but those maybe million and a half Israelites. And Pharez, the line of Pharez, which weren't all the nobles, they're there. They go out with the Exodus, with Moses. And they're the Judah line out of which David comes. Okay, so David is out of Pharez. And Zara's over there in the Mediterranean. Okay. Well, okay, those are the two kings. And again, we're going to get into a lot of detail about the Zara line. I mean, it's right in the... All you do is substitute Israelite for the name Hyksos. And you look up in any of the top 3 encyclopedias, we'll take a look at some of that, and you'll find a lot of information about the Hyksos. Those were the Israelites. See? But so what? What happened to Zedekiah? Zedekiah can't rule. His eyes are out, and he's over in brass chains in Babylon. And all of his sons, all of the heirs to his throne, they're gone. They're gone. Well, now, wait a minute. Wait a minute. The sons of Zerah didn't get David's prophecy from Nathan. They didn't get that. They're not eligible to rule. We talked about that last time. Brutus, who founded New Troy, London, in 1100 BC, he can't rule all of the lost tribes when they come by 500 years later. He can't rule them. He's not eligible because he's not out of the line of David. Only a king out of the line of David can rule other Israelites. Brutus, he can rule his Trojans. You know, they're out of the line of Judah. He can rule them, but he can't rule all the Israelites. Well, God's got a real problem here. We don't have anybody out of the line of pharaohs to rule. Maybe. No, maybe about it. Go to Jeremiah 41. Jeremiah 41. Oh, do we want to start early on? Oh, wait, verse 10. There's a lot of good stuff that we're going to get to later on. I'd like to bring in now, but we won't do that. Let's start at we'll just start at 10, okay? Just start at 10. Okay, I got to give you some background, okay? Now it came to pass in the 7th month that Ishmael, the son of Nethaniah and so forth, of the royal seed, even 10 men with him, came to Gedaliah. See, Gedaliah was put in charge. He was like the governor, not the king, but the governor of these haves and have-nots that were all left over, the vine dressers and the husbandmen and stuff, and he was put in charge. Okay, so this guy Ishmael, I want to be king. He comes and says, even 10 men with him, to the son to Gedaliah, to Mizpah, and they did eat bread together. Then arose Ishmael the son of Nethaniah, 10 men with him, and smote Gedaliah the son of Ahikam, and the son of, and they killed him. He slew all the Jews that were with him, even with Gedaliah in Mizpah, the Chaldeans that were found there, and the men of war. Whoa. Well, he kind of took over, didn't he? You know, military coup. But here's a little part down here that's extremely important. Verse 10. Then Ishmael carried away captive all the residue of the people that were in Mizpah, even the king's, Zedekiah, the king's daughters. Oh, he had sons and daughters. Okay. Sons and daughters. And all the people that remained in Mizpah, who Nebuzaradan, remember he's the captain of the guard, Nebuzaradan, carried, Nebuzaradan, the captain of the guard, had committed to Gedaliah, the son of Ahikam. Okay? Zedekiah's got some daughters. So what? So what? Well, so what? So Numbers 27. Numbers 27. What's that got to do with anything? Numbers 27. They're in the promised land. Just got there not too long ago, you know. And we set the context here, verse 1. Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, the son of Hepher, the son of Gilead, the son of Machir, the son of Manasseh, of the families of Manasseh, the son of Joseph. They like genealogies, okay? But that establishes things, right? That's why they do it. And these are the names of the daughters. Okay, and they stood before Moses and before Eleazar and the congregation. They said, our father died in the wilderness, okay, before they got in there. Okay? And he was not in the company of them that gathered themselves together against the Lord, in the company of Korah. He was a good guy. He died with his own sins and had no sons. No sons. He was a good guy, but he didn't have any sons. He died. He said, well, why should the name of our father be done away from among his family? Because he hath no son. Huh? Give unto us, therefore, a possession, among the brethren of our father. So, they pass out. They're not talking to Moses here. Moses didn't make it in. They're passing out the inheritances, the lots and the plots of land and stuff. They said, well, we should inherit too. Our father should have a inheritance that comes. And they say, well, go ask God. He go ask Moses. Wait, Moses? No, they're still, that's right, they're still outside the promised land. And he said, well, ask God. And Moses goes to God. He says, what do you do here? Goes back, and here's what he says. Verse 8, 27:8. And thou shalt speak unto the children of Israel, saying, if a man die and have no son, then ye shall cause his inheritance to pass unto his daughter. You see what that does with the daughters of Zedekiah? Nebuchadnezzar didn't cut the line. He would have had to cut the line completely by killing the daughters too. They weren't even taken captive. They were with Jeremiah. They made it away with Jeremiah. We'll find that out. So the sons go with Zedekiah. They get killed. He gets put in Babylon. And now there's nobody to take the throne, is what Nebuchadnezzar thinks. Because that's what Babylonian rule is. You rule in Babylon, you got to be out of the kingly line. And if the king's sons are all dead, somebody else is going to be king, not his line. See, nobody has the right to the throne. Right? And then just to make sure that isn't just one little option, he goes down the whole list of all the families. If he doesn't have any sons, you get the daughters. Doesn't have any daughters, goes through his brother. Doesn't have any brothers, it goes to his father's kids. Doesn't have any father's kids, it goes to the next of kin down the line somewhere. In other words, the inheritance of the family goes on forever. It's a forever thing. You always have your inheritance. And that's one of the ways that, there's laws about the inheritance. The book of Ruth is all about the inheritance, and what you do to redeem the inheritance when you don't have any heirs to the throne and all that stuff. So, God to the rescue. He says daughters can be okay. So now we don't have a dilemma anymore. We have a few challenges, because the daughters are with Zedekiah, and then he's taken away, and they go with Jeremiah, and Jeremiah is their ward. And as I said earlier, and we'll get into heavy detail on this, and a lot of people are going to tell you it's not true, but you'll see, and if you do your own research, you'll find out how true it is. Jeremiah is Zedekiah's grandfather. Well, who else? And he's out of the priestly line, okay? He's a priest. He's these kids, he's their great-grandfather. Who better to give the daughters to and to be wards of their next of kin kind of thing? See, because Josiah and Jehoiakim and all those they're all dead. or over in captive and stuff. Jeremiah is the logical person. He's the next of kin to take the daughters under his wing, right? He goes to Egypt. We'll hear about that later on, The people say, "Oh God, Babylon, Nebuchadnezzar is going to come and he's going to kill us. Let's go to Egypt." Jeremiah asked God and see, and he said, okay. He asked God, and God says, don't do it. He comes back, he says, God said, don't do that. You go to Egypt, you'll get killed anyway. They go, they get killed, but a remnant is left. Jeremiah, Baruch, his secretary, companion, scribe, servant, whatever, and the daughters of the king, and a couple of handmaids for them, at least that much. And they come back to the Holy Land. And then they're gone. What happened to them? They went to Ireland, okay? So it's perfectly natural for Jeremiah to have the guardianship over the daughters, right? Again, next time, we're going to find out what happens to Zara in more detail, not just that they migrated across the northern Mediterranean. Let's see, we got the twin brother. Oh, well, we talked about that already, right? Another group. First, we have to let Charlton Heston part the Red Sea. Okay. Oh, well. There's another installment. Stay tuned for the next 12. It's a lot of fun, the Lost Tribes. I hope you're enjoying it as much as I am. It really is so important, this study, because it just really proves God and all of that stuff in the Bible. It proves all of that stuff in the Bible that you can trace out. Which means, and when you start studying that and you see the Lost Tribes, and just what we've done so far in the first 11 installments should prove God's reality to you. And if God is real, then everything he said in the Bible is true. Like, you can go to heaven if you trust me. I want some of that, And another reason why it's really so important is because it's so easy. I mean, you just get a few history books together and it's all right there. All the information is there, who they were, where they went, what they did, everything. It's extremely easy to find and prove. And it's solid evidence. It isn't just conjecture, or maybe one person said this, one verse of scripture said, Lost Tribes. I hope you're able to stick with this series. Oh, it's very important. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time, right? God bless.